Hello and welcome back. We're at a very exciting point here. We have worked really hard to get a system in place that allows clients to connect to a game server and then start the game only when everyone who is connected is ready. We are in fact starting the game, but we're only doing it right now on the server side. So we need to push that information back to each individual client so they can be triggered to start the game on their end. In our server script, let's head to our game objects ready game method, the method we were working on in our last video. So here I am on my server script. Here is my game object, and I'm going to scroll down to ready game, wherever it is. Here it is. So here is our ready game method. Recall, this method is running in a thread for each and every connected player and their respective player socket. So, I just want you to remember this. So let's remove our print statement here that we were printing at the bottom. We were just giving confirmation on the server and playing the game, which is why, if you remember in our last video, it printed playing the game twice because I had this method was running in two threads, so each thread printed it because we had two players playing. So we're actually going to delete that print statement right here, and outside of the while loop, once we break out of the while loop, what do we want to do? Well, we have updated a player's flag. We've updated the is playing flag to be true. So I want to send the updated status flags back to our given player. And so the game object on the server side has a method, sendPlayerInfo, that we can call to do that. So outside of the while loop, once we break out of this while loop, indicating that the game has officially started, we'll say send updated player flags back to this player. And so we'll call the game's send player info method. And that is going to require a specific player that we want to target and their respective player socket that we can use for communication. And so if you look, that method is right here. So send player info. So in here, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to get rid of pass. The first thing that we should do is probably compile a dictionary called player info. Then that will contain all of the pertinent information that we're altering over here on our server side. So we kind of did something similar. I'll just highlight this so we don't lose our spot. If I come back over to the client side, we had a send player info method, I'm sure. Yeah, here it is. So we created a dictionary called player info. In here we had the coordinates and our status flags. On the server end, we're just going to do our status flags. I'm not going to alter the coordinates necessarily. So we'll just do our status flags, and then we'll create a header and send it over, just like we did here. So on our server, send player info, the first thing we'll do is we'll create a dictionary with the status flags for this particular player. And again, this is going to be all running in a thread for each individual connected client. So we'll say player info is equal to, here is our dictionary. We'll have a key called is waiting with the associated value of our player objects. So player, the player is right here. So player dot is waiting. All right, we'll do an is ready key, and we'll say the value is player.isReady, and then we'll do a is playing, and the associated key is player.is is playing. Perfect. So now that we have created the dictionary, let's turn it into a string with JSON. We'll get a header, we'll encode, and we'll send it over, all that good stuff. So let's walk through doing it. We'll say send the player info over to this player. So we'll say player info JSON. We'll turn our dictionary into a string using json.dumps, and we'll pass in player info. So dictionary, you can't encode it. We turn it into a string. Look at that. We can encode it. So now we'll get a header, which is going to be the size of that string. So we'll get the length of player info JSON. But like we said, this returns an integer. We want it to be a string, so we'll cast it to a string. So now I can append some white spaces until it is the correct length. So we'll say while the length of header is less than our header length, which is stored in our connection object, self.connection.header underscore length, we'll add some white space. Header plus equals a white space. That will ensure that the header is the right size, so that on the other end we know exactly how much data to pull from the data stream. And we'll say player socket So we want to send now. We want to send using this socket that's right here in this method. Player socket dot send. We're going to send the header dot encode, and we will use self dot connection dot encoder. And then we'll send our player info JSON. So we'll say player socket dot send player info JSON dot encode. We got to encode it, and we'll use our encoder self dot connection dot encoder. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So we built our dictionary with our updated flags. In this particular one, we are changing the isPlaying flag, and now we're going to send it over. So since we're sending updated player information for each and every connected player, the client script should probably be listening for this information. So I'm going to save my server, and we're now going to head over to our client side. And the client should always be listening for this incoming information. So we should probably run it in a thread. And I guess the question is, where should we call this thread? Well, we should call it inside of the game's ready game method. Since it's here, we're indicating that, hey, this particular player is ready to play the game. So now I want to listen for an incoming message from the server to indicate that all players are ready to play the game. So on my client, I'm going to go to the game's ready game method. Where is it? Ready game, right here. And let's add some stuff here. So client yep, perfect. So inside of ready game, right here we've sent our updated status to the server. We said, hey, we're ready. So now we should begin listening for the status of all players being ready. So we'll say monitor for the start of the game from the server. All right, so we'll call this start thread, and it will be threading.thread. And what do we want to target here? Well, we want to start the game, so we've got a start game method. So we should target this. We'll say target is equal to self.startGame. Start game has no arguments, so we don't have to use the args here. And let's just start this thread. So we'll say start thread.start. Okay, so you betcha, you know what you were going to do next. We're going to go write start game. So we're calling the start game method right here in this thread. So let's go write start game now. So inside of here, we want this thread to continually run until we get confirmation from the server that the game is in fact starting. So I'm just going to use I'll use an infinite while loop. I'll say while true. I guess we can do it this way. We'll say wait to receive information from the server that the game has started. So I'm just going to wait until the server sends me something back. So I want to receive some updated player information. I believe we've got send player info. We've got a receive player info. So it says receive specific information about this player from the server. We have to call it right here. So we're waiting to get some more updated flags from the server. And so we'll say self.receive player info. We'll call that right here. Why don't we go write receive player info right now, since we're calling it? All right, so here is receive player info. Inside of here, what do we need to receive? Well, the server is going to send over a header, which is going to contain information about the next packet's size, and then they're sending over that player info JSON with the updated player flags, the updated status flags. So let's get both. We'll say packet size is equal to, we need to get our socket, which is stored here. We are in our game object. Our game object has access to a connection, so self.connection, and that has the player socket, so self.connection.player socket. We want to receive. We're going to set our header length, self.connection.header length, as the byte size. And then we need to decode this, so .decode, and we'll pass in our encoder, self.connection.encoder. Awesome. Now that we have that, let's go grab the player info JSON that's going to come through. So player info JSON is equal to self.connection.playerSocket.receive. And here, the size of this packet we've specified is the integer value of our packet size. So we're going to grab exactly the amount of data we need from the data stream. We don't have to decode it because JSON is going to decode it for us when we take this string and turn it back into a dictionary. So we'll say player info is equal to json.loads, and we'll pass in game state. I lied there. We're going to pass in player info JSON. Perfect. So string. This is an encoded string. It's going to decode it, and now we have a dictionary. So now right here, if you think about it, we have a dictionary of updated player information. We need to set that player information to the player on our client side. So we'll just say set the updated flags for the player. And you know what's nice? I'm pretty sure our player has a method. The player object here on the client side has a method called setPlayerInfo. And this mimics exactly the kind of thought process we had done on the server side. So let's call our player object. The player is attached to the game, self.player.setPlayerInfo. And we'll pass in this dictionary of player information. Why don't we go write set player info now for the player object on the client side, since we're calling it. So here is our player, right? Player, perfect. And we'll scroll down. Here is set player info. So what do we need to set in here? Well, if we look back at our server, what did we send? We sent 3 status flags. So we have to set the updated value of those 3 particular status flags. All right. Easy enough. So we'll say we're inside of our player. So remember, if we're inside of our player, to reference our player, we're just going to use self. So we'll say self.isWaiting is equal to the player info dictionary we passed in, and we'll look at the isWaiting key. Then we'll do self.isReady, and we'll pass in our player info dictionary, and we'll use the isReady key. And then we will do self.isPlaying. Our last status flag is the dictionary player info, and we'll use the isPlaying key. Perfect. So now I think we're actually set to go back to our start game method now. So, it's funny because I think we did the exact same thing kind of on the client side, right? We said, okay, we're going to run a thread where we're going to try to receive some information, but we got to go write a couple of other methods before we can actually finish what the thread was meant to do. So now when we, if we just kind of like walk through this, under ready game, we are going to hit enter. So our status flag is set to true. We're ready. We send that information to the server. The server gets it under ready game. Yep, the server gets it because we're watching to see if that individual player is ready, and that happens here in ready game. The server gets it right here, and then they wait infinitely until all players send it. When all players send it, then we update their status flags to being true, is playing is true, and then we send it back. When we send it back, we're going to wait to hear for it to come back. We're going to monitor this thread. We're just going to sit here and wait till we get that information back. And once we get that information back, then we receive the player info, which we've already written, and then we set their info, which is going to change. The most important thing is it's going to change the player's isPlaying flag. So now here we'll say if our player, we're in the game object now, so we have to reference self.player.isPlaying. So if that isPlaying flag has successfully been set to true, then what does it mean? Well, it means the game is on. So the game itself is active. And if you recall, our game class has a Boolean isActive, which was false. We are now going to set it to true here. So under the start game, we'll set self.isActive equals to true, and the players has a few Boolean flags. We've already set the players isPlaying flag to true, but what I now want to do is set their ready flag to false. They're no longer ready. They are actually playing the game. So we'll say self.player.isReady. Let's set that flag to false. And then what we should do is update maybe our status message. So we'll update our status message. We'll say, I don't know, let's do self.player.status message is, we'll just simply say play. I guess that's a pretty good status message for when the game is going. And then once that's all done, we will break out of our while loop. Okay, so I think that's probably like the last thing that we'll do. And so now at this point, gameplay should begin. So let's run this and test this and see if everything works up to this point. And you know what I'm going to do on my server? Why don't I just change? I'm going to change some of these variables here. So I'm going to do 600 and I don't know, we'll do 60, sure. And let's do, have we tested it for 4 players? Let's actually see, do we get all 4 people in? So I'm just going to run it for 4. Let's see. All right, incoming connections. We'll run our client and let's see if everything is happening the way we want it to be. So there's our first player. Looks great. All right, let's do our second player. All right, now we got 2 people joining. Awesome. We got 3 people joining. Very good. All right, there's blue. Looks great. And then our last one should be yellow. I don't think we've actually tested this before. So let's just see. So, all right, all 4 people are in. 4 players in game, no longer accepting new players. Great. Let's bring up all of these windows here. Zoop, 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 and zoop. And we got the outlines. So let's see. Let's hit enter on player 1. Closed. It closed. It closed. And it all closed. And it says name thread is not defined on line 106. So this is an error on my client file in 106. Oh, I made a mistake here, another syntax error. So where I was trying to start my thread, I said thread.thread. That's not thread.thread. The name of the module is threading.thread. So we got to make sure we change that on line 106 or near that if you are not using the same white space as I am, where we start our start thread. It's threading.thread. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm just going to change this back to 2 players. 4 players, it looks like the functionality is working okay. So now for the interest of time, we'll set that to 2. Let's run this and let's see what happens. All right. Waiting for 2 total players. Now we got 2 total players and the text changes to press enter to play. That's the beauty of threads. I'll press enter. It says ready waiting. And now I'm going to press enter here. It says ready waiting. And we have another, how disappointing is that? Another syntax error. And this is in my client file on line 148. Packet size is equal to connection dot player socket. I spelled connection wrong right here. You know, I spelled connection wrong before, I think, too. I think it's just a tough word for me to spell. So you want to make sure you spell connection correctly. Hopefully you did. You're probably a better speller than I am. So let's just run this one last time. And I think the phrase is third try is the charm. Although, it's good to debug. It's good to see mistakes in action. Everybody makes them, and everybody has to fix them. So it's good to see that process of going through. Using, your error messages is always helpful. Trying to turn me making a bunch of mistakes into a positive. All right, so now I'm going to hit enter here. I'm going to hit enter here. And if you notice when I did that, look at this. We've got indication that the game is in fact being played. So this is working. So, we have built a very impressive system for client to send information to the server to send information to the client, for the server to compile information from multiple clients and push everything back to each individual client. So this is great. I think we're at a point now where the real fun is going to start, because now that the game is starting, we can talk about player movement and gameplay features for the game, and that is exactly what we will do in our next video. So I'll see you then.